Welcome back to Julie's Village. I'm glad you're here. As a reminder, if you would like more information or you would like to be added to my waiting list for receiving coaching services to help support your family and your individual situation, please feel free to send me an email at juliesvillage@gmail.com. Julie's does not have an apostrophe. This episode is all about behavior, specifically looking at the purpose behind behavior. If you are a special education teacher or you're working in that world at all, you will be more familiar with the term functional behavioral assessment. So this episode is all about how do we look at what is happening with a child's behavior to try to figure out why it is happening. Once you understand why it is happening, that makes it much easier to intervene, to figure out what your child is looking for, what they're needing, and seeing how you can support them and help them to find better ways to get their needs met without needing to resort to these behaviors. And these behaviors can range from mildly annoying all the way to unsafe. This strategy works for all of the above. Um, this is really closely related again to task analysis, where you assess everything that they can do, everything that's required for the task, and where the breakdown is. That's very similar here as we are looking at we look at patterns of behavior to try to figure out again where the breakdown is, what is their purpose, and maybe what skills are they needing to help them to be able to cope or to use different strategies. But again, today is just taking time to just analyze what is happening and then try to use that information to determine why it is happening. So, some of the things that we look for in these patterns of behavior are: when is the behavior happening? Are you noticing it maybe every day at bedtime or every day as they're walking in the door after school? How long is it happening? Is this just a few minutes or is this going on for hours? You are also looking at, like, again, that intensity piece. Is it just mildly annoying or is it unsafe for the child and for others? Things that might be unsafe for them can include that self-harm, like biting themselves, or really impulsive behaviors. So things that might cause accidental injury. Maybe what they're doing is in itself isn't necessarily dangerous, but it could become dangerous if they were to do that thing in the wrong area or with the wrong person. For instance, climbing. Just climbing certain things is very safe and it's okay, but if they are climbing some areas that could easily topple over, like a bookshelf or things like that, that's something that is is higher priority that would need to be addressed. Typically, when I am assessing behavior and trying to figure out the function, I will limit it to just one or two behaviors at a time, just my top priority behaviors or the team's top priority behaviors. Again, if you are a special education teacher and you are trying to write an FBA, some examples here might be that my top priority in is something that's happening in the building and something that's happening on the playground, for instance. If I had a student who my biggest priority in the building is when they are running out of the classroom, and then my biggest priority on the playground is in that less structured environment, that's when I started to see physical aggression. Those would be my top two behaviors, and I would focus on both of those um, as I tried to dig deeper to find out what was going on. So, again, in these patterns, you're looking at um, when it is happening, where it is happening. Is this only happening at home? Is it happening at the grocery store? Again, in the school setting, is it happening in the classroom? Is it happening on the playground? Where are these big concerns? Or is it just happening across the board? That's valuable information as well. You also want to pay attention to who is it happening with? Is it happening when other kids are around, certain adults, all adults, when they're by themselves? All of that is important information. And then you're also looking at other things that are happening around it too. So you might notice that, like, boy, when he has not had enough sleep, that's when I see him the most angry. Or when she is really hungry right before meal times, that's when I'm seeing this happen the most. So teasing out all of those pieces can help you to better assess, like better assess what is happening, and maybe even from there you can see some pretty clear things of the reasons why it might be happening. Again, if it's like, boy, it's right before meal times, that last hour before it's time for lunch and dinner is when I see just explosive behaviors. That can tell you that your intervention might need to include something that has to do with meal times. Right along with these when and where and with who, the intensity, the duration, the other piece that you want to look at is what is happening right before and what is happening right after any behaviors occur. That can also give some really valuable information. So some ways that you can collect this information, I liked to just have like a notepad that I could jot things down on. Sometimes people have used like clickers or rubber bands on one wrist and then they switch it to the other wrist when they see something happen. So that might be if you're looking at how often something happens, such as interrupting. If your big concern for your child is, boy, they just are interrupting conversations constantly. This idea of constantly, if you look at how often it really is happening, that can let you know, like, yeah, it really is constant, or it's not as frequent as I thought, but it's enough that we need to address this. When you're thinking about patterns of behavior, it's also important to look at, again, that intensity piece is just sometimes we look at that top behavior, that most dangerous or the most concerning behavior or the most disruptive behavior, whatever it is. But there's usually things that happen leading up to that. So I also will jot down some notes on, well, what does it look like when they are just right on track? I know they're having a great day, they're doing well, or maybe a great part of the day. How do I know that they're doing really well? What does, we'll just use the name Johnny. What does Johnny look like when things are going really, really well? And then I might look to see, so when they're just starting to get off, when I'm just noticing, like, yeah, they're not doing their best anymore, they're not super upset, or whatever is happening with the behavior isn't really intense yet, I might just jot down some things that I start to see. Like maybe I notice that Johnny just wiggles a little bit more. He has a little bit more trouble sitting still. He is in his chair, but looking more for things to play with. He's moving around more, things like that. And it will vary case by case. Every child is different in what they look like. Some actually withdraw more, but some that you see more activity. Then oftentimes there's another step when you start to see more agitation um, for some behaviors, especially if you're looking at more of like a physical aggression or verbal aggression, or um, eloping or running out of the house or the room or their workspace. Those more impulsive behaviors or behaviors that are less safe. There's again typically this buildup before they get to that point, and you'll see again signs that they're just becoming more agitated. And I usually break it down. So when they're doing great, When I'm starting to notice that maybe something is off and then that agitation is building, usually there's one or two phases of that agitation building. And I just write down what that looks like for that child. So again, if I'm watching Johnny, I'm going to write down what that looks like just for Johnny. And then I write down what does it look like when they have just peaked. They've had enough, and things are at their worst. I write down what that looks like and specific things that I see them do. Like I write things like raised voice. For some children, it includes throwing things. It might include trying to hit or kick or bite other people or themselves. And then I think about, well, what does it look like when I know that they're starting to come back around? How do I know? And again, just writing down specific things that I see that, like, maybe they're slowing, their movements are slowing down. I hear them panting. Um, the volume of their voice comes down. Those are all things that I'm looking for. And then usually there's like this, if it's gone all the way to that peak point, usually there's like this just release afterwards where they're just exhausted. Um, and oftentimes there might be tears, there might be apologies, they might show signs that they are really remorseful about whatever happened, or guilt maybe of maybe the way they feel that they treated somebody. And so again, anything that I see there, I write that down and what that looks like. Um, and then how do I know that we're back? What does it look like when they're just I'm feeling confident we'd be okay to go to the grocery store or whatever it is. Again, I just write down the specific things that I see. Usually, I have about 3 to 5 behaviors that I notice at each one of those phases or stages, and that's what I write down. It doesn't have to be super long. It could be less for your child. Maybe there's a little bit more. And if you are a special education teacher and you're looking at this to do a functional behavioral assessment, oftentimes when we were first introduced to these FBAs or functional behavioral assessments, you would see just paragraphs written about these children, and it included so much information, and it was kind of overwhelming and difficult to sift through. I have found that the more succinct these are, the more that you can become laser focused on the specific needs of that child, what is specifically going on, what are the specific needs, and it makes it so much easier and clearer to create your intervention plan. So whatever works for you, to just look at these things and start assessing again. Who is involved? When is it happening? What does it look like when it happens? How long does it last? Are there any things that you're starting to pick up on that are cues that happen right before? Are there any things that you see are happening right after? In the consequences and decisions episode, you can see a little bit more about this idea of the things that happen after and how they can be reinforcing, or how they can help to reduce or eliminate behaviors. As you're considering those things that happen after, when you're looking at it through this lens, you can look to see specifically, are there things that are happening that are reinforcing what I don't want to see or decreasing what I do want to see, or vice versa? Are there certain things that I'm noticing help to decrease the things that we don't want to see happening, or helping to increase the things that we do want to see happening? For example, when of just this idea of things that we maybe are thinking are going one way but aren't working the way that we necessarily hope that they would. Just a personal example, I remember as a kid, I was really, really shy. I did not like a lot of attention. And teachers would often say, I like how this person is sitting. And when they would say, I love how quietly Julie came to the carpet, I would just get so embarrassed. And instead of thinking like, it's great, I gotta come to the carpet quietly, I would think like, how can I fly under the radar next time? Like maybe I need to move around a little bit more so that they don't call me out. Um, so knowing that about your child, those things that truly are motivating can also help you to recognize like, oh, maybe something's happening after the behavior that I really that is really reinforcing what is happening and causing it to happen more often. So, just again to summarize, as you are thinking through these things, you're looking for what is the purpose behind the behavior and looking at when, where, and how it's happening, with whom it's happening, how long it's lasting, how frequently it's happening. That can all give you really valuable information to then go back and look at later. And I'll do another episode in the future that will talk about like, okay, now that we have this information, what do I do with it? But the first place is to start with just gathering that information and helping you to better understand what is going on for your child. If you have any recommendations or tips to help with gathering this information, I invite you to leave that in the comments. If you have any further questions or comments about um, finding out the purpose of a behavior or a functional behavior analysis or assessment, I invite you to also leave that in the comments. If you have suggestions or questions for future episodes, I invite you to leave that in the comments as well. And if this information is helpful to you, I invite you to like, share, subscribe this channel to help get the word out there to others who might need this information. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.